preparing to live stream the meeting, setting up your meeting for YouTube Live, this and that. All right. Now we're going to record to the cloud. Ed, I see your video is on, but by the way, it's pointing toward the right. It's pointing toward.
There we go.
Towards like the ceiling. Okay. All right. And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. Michigan just beat Rutgers 71-64. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith and Darren Weiss. Frank Vasner is out. My opening statement. Well, Michigan is going to keep Ward Manuel after all. That's all I'm going to say. Ed, what's your opening statement?
My opening statement is that it's more than past time to give the Michigan basketball team, and more specifically head coach Juwan Howard, their respect and just due for the season they've had so far. All
right. Darren Weiss, what is your opening statement?
Yeah, I'm going to stick on the same page as Ed. It's good to see Michigan back on the floor. They took over 2.5 weeks, close to 3 weeks off, and, they're a little slow out of the gates, but, they're picking up right where they left off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Darren Weiss on Twitter at DW33ZYY. And on Instagram at Darren Weiss8, the number 8. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports mobile app, Viget. Enter the referral code STABLES for Stables Media, capital S at the beginning, lowercase letter B in the middle, when you sign up for the Viget for an account. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the Viget app and sign up with the referral code STABLES for Stables Media. So we got Red Wings, Pistons, Spartans, Wolverines, and even Lions to talk about. Also, the Tigers reported to spring training, pitchers and catchers, and the rest of the team as well. Plus, we have the new segment, The Question of the Night, along with the What's Your Grade segment. So we'll start with the Red Wings first. Just the same old story. They split the doubleheader in Nashville against the Predators at Bridgestone Arena. They lost 3-2 and then won 4-2. Jonathan Bernier made his return, and then they got swept by the Blackhawks 3-2 in overtime and then 2-0 on NBCSN. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Frank. Ed, just nothing changing with this Red Wings team. Ed, go right ahead.
Yeah, Taylor, it seems like the prevalent theme that we saw throughout the majority of the season so far, it showed its ugly head once again these past 2 games, specifically against the Blackhawks, which is offensive woes. The team struggling to get a head start offensively, no matter how many times they try to attack the net or be aggressive enough, or not, or even on the power play. It seemed like nothing was going right for them. They only had 1 goal, essentially in the first game. They didn't really wake up until middle of the second and third period, and they still wound up losing in overtime. And then here in this one, stone cold shutout, and despite the effort that Jonathan Bernier did give them, it just wasn't enough. And again, it just speaks to an example of no matter how well they seemingly have made at least of an improvement on the standpoint of goaltending, their offensive cohesion as a whole is still very severely lacking. And again, that does, some of it does rely on the talent, but I think that has to go, again, point back to coaching. And what we've seen so far, it's still an unimpressive of display from whether it be Jeff Blashill or other coaches on the coaching staff, but it's just not substantiate enough to warrant any confidence that at least specifically Blashill in particular, he deserves another go after this season.
Yeah, I guess so. Darren, what say you on the Red Wings?
They don't look good. Eiserman tried to bring in a few guys, Mark Stahl, Bobby Ryan, a couple, veteran leaders, some guys that could produce a little bit. And, you know, the Red Wings just don't have the talent. And continuing to be bad, they will get these high draft picks, but these draft picks aren't going to come in ready right away. So it's going to take some time. I think Steve Eiserman knows what he's doing. He's taking chances on a lot of young guys in free agency and, through the draft and trading for different guys, maybe trying to jumpstart their career, give them a second chance. But, watching them last night or whenever they played Chicago, the power play is abysmal. I think they're 30th in the league and in the power play. And they don't really have any first line talent. Larkin's a really nice player. I think on a Stanley Cup team, he probably centers the second line. I think Mantha, same thing, a second line guy. So we just don't have the talent to compete right now. But, that's not Eiserman's plan. We're not trying to compete right now. We're trying to build assets, get good draft picks, let the young kids play and go from there. So with that being said, we were expected to be bad this year. So as long as the young kids are getting better and maybe we see some high draft picks come up later in the year, then, you got to look at the small victories like that, not at the overall season and the disappointment Blashill and the team's been.
Right, because it's been the same old story up. Yeah, even the small victories don't even matter. We're not exactly gonna be high on them. Nobody needs to. And to your point, Darren, draft picks taking time. Draft picks always take time with every professional team in sports. And may I add, players need more development. They need better development from better coaching. And Jeff Blashill is not NHL caliber, like I pointed out several times before recently. It's gotta be on the coaching. If a team at its entirety plays that bad, it's on the coaching, period. Frank Vasner pointed it out too. You can follow him on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vasner. So the Red Wings play a doubleheader against the Florida Panthers at Little Caesars Arena Friday at 7 and Saturday at 5. Then they're home against the Nashville Predators Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30. The Pistons, they beat the Boston Celtics 108-102, and then they beat the New Orleans Pelicans 123-112. Mason Plumlee in that game, a triple-double of 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. That's very surprising, may I add. Got the Spurs game postponed, the Dallas Mavericks game postponed. But on that same night, the Pistons led by as many as at least 20, but they blew it and lost to the Chicago Bulls 105-102. I know the Pistons aren't supposed to win that many games, but that game in Chicago, I thought they had a chance. And man, they just absolutely choked it, Ed. We'll start with you again, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, they definitely choked it, more so of them, for example, not finishing down the stretch, tightening up, not making the shots that they're supposed to make, for example. That'll be one key point, whether it be looking for players other than Jeremy Grant to produce and make a bucket for you. Where granted, it's not his fault that the team had their struggles. He had 43 points or so. That was like one of, if not his best outing, offensive outing this season, proving far and away he has been more than a valuable asset to the team with the signing in this past offseason. I don't know what that's going to mean for come trade deadline or what, but he's definitely proven himself to be up to standard for this team's standards, at least for this year. But again, not making your shots, just tightening up down the stretch was because, again, no matter if it was Dwayne Casey in charge or before that Stan Van Gundy, this team has had a very severe lack of finding abilities to close down games, especially close, tight games such as this, which is what you need to prove or show you have to be able to do to make that next step into the next level of competition, to show that you're more than just a bottom dwelling basement dweller. But they've yet to show that, and that's one reason why they're in the proverbial space that they're in right now. It's not so much talent as when it comes to the basic fundamentals of, hey, make the most out of this possession, play solid defense on the other end, and there you go. And yet, this simple formula they've yet to really master or barrel down on in any type of form, and it's beyond frustrating. It really is. It's a tired act at this point to see this team not being able to perform to their best level. They do okay throughout the first three, and then when it's time to really show out when it matters most, they go cold in the fourth. And despite the what you see out of guys like Steve Michaela hitting 4 threes over the weekend, I believe it was against New Orleans, or Sadiq Bey with 30 plus points off the bench against the Celtics. It takes more than that. Still takes more than that to be able to be not just a competitive team in this league, but a winning team. And they've yet to show that.
Mm-hmm. They do. Darren, you're up next.
I really like what the Pistons are doing. They're losing games while playing the young guys, and these young guys are they're really developing. I mean, Sadiq Bey looks like a great wing player, a great wing guy that can play in this league for a long time. And I know we're 25 games into the season, but he's just sort of got that generic makeup. Isaiah Stewart is another guy, just a high motor, high energy guy. I don't think he's ever gonna average 20 and 10, but this was a guy that came out of high school when he committed to Washington. He was the number one player in his class. So, this is a guy that always plays with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And I like guys that want to play. The Pistons culture has not been that of the past few years, with all the different attitude problems and whatnot with Drummond and Reggie Jackson. So, if you were a Piston fan, you got to look long term. You want best case scenario is the Pistons lose every night. They're in these games, which they have been. They keep it to single digits, and the young kids are getting a lot of minutes, 25, 30 plus minutes. Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, Killian Hayes when he comes back. That's going to be the big one because this is a scorers league, this is a guards league, and we're going to need guards going forward. So if they can keep losing but continue to play the young guys, then we're going to be in good shape.
Absolutely agree with that.
Definitely.
Absolutely agree with
that. Yeah, definitely. I don't know what that beeping was. We apologize for that background noise, but anyway, hey Darren, there's some beeping going on, but anyway, the Pistons are at the Memphis Grizzlies Friday at 8, at the Orlando Magic Sunday and Tuesday at 7. And then they're at the New Orleans Pelicans Wednesday at 8. That's a 4 game south of the border road swing after that loss to the Chicago Bulls at United Center. So Blake Griffin out of the lineup indefinitely as the team pursues a trade. We heard that earlier this week, and buyout talks could brew as well. Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, we're going to go right to our question of the night. We're not going to do 5 questions, but the question of the night: will the Pistons be better or worse off without Blake Griffin, or will it not matter? Ed, you're up first. Go right ahead.
Sorry, it was like a slight technical issue, man. What was the question again, please?
Yep. Will the Pistons be better or worse off without Blake Griffin, or will it not matter?
No, it matters, because in terms of where Blake is at this point of his career, what he wants to do, what he wants to be on, it's far different from the long-term plans of what the Pistons have in mind. I think it's been evident now for quite some time. It's just really manifested itself at this past stretch of games where I don't know if it's the injuries fully showing itself or Blake himself showing a disinterest. But the writing is on the wall, and it's more than time for these two entities to go their separate ways. I don't know if they're going to be able to fully trade Blake's contract. They may just end up buying him out. That's what's the more likely option in my view. But whatever the case may be, it's quite evident for this rebuild to really go forward. You still have to essentially make a purge of the roster moves that was made under Stan Van Gundy regime. So as much as I like Blake, you gotta be acknowledged of the reality of that. Yeah, it's just not working out. It has not worked out. And now, just like what we saw with Matthew Stafford and even with Derrick Rose, you got to part ways. And I'm just glad that they came to an understanding as amicable as possible. And they're just trying to look out. And now they're just trying to work on the best possible solution for himself and for Blake and for the team in general. So I believe when all is said and done, when you get your players involved, which is what Ed Stefanski and Troy Weaver's trying to do, you'll see a much better Pistons team. So to answer your questions, yes.
All right. I would say yes as well. Darren, now it's your turn. So, Darren, will the Pistons be better or worse off without Blake Griffin, or will it not matter? I'll unmute you right here. So, Darren?
Yeah, Taylor, they're going to be better off, and I'll tell you why. Blake Griffin, like you said, Ed, he's in the twilight of his career. He needs to be in a place where he wants to win. And, if we can, he's playing 30 plus minutes a night. If we can give those minutes to someone that's up and coming for Detroit, that we have a lot of team control, that's young, like a Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, any Josh Jackson, any of these guys, it's better off for the Pistons in the long run, because Blake is, it is what it is with Blake. He's injured. He's not going to give you anything. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Yep, definitely. So that's Pistons. Now to college basketball. The Michigan State Spartans men's basketball team got crushed by the Iowa Hawkeyes at home, 88-58. And then they gave the Purdue Boilermakers another fight, but Purdue still won again to sweep that season series, 75-65 at Mackey Arena in West Lafayette. They'll take on the Indiana Hoosiers in Bloomington Saturday at noon on ESPN at Assembly Hall, and home against the Illinois Fighting Illini Tuesday at 7 on FS1. Man, Ed, we'll start with you and then we'll go over to Frank. Man, the Michigan State Spartans are just not getting it done anymore.
No, they're not together on the same page. It's clearly evident. Whenever you see a well-coached Tom Izzo team, they're on one accord, whether it be on offense, defense, whatever the case may be. You can see that type of communication on point throughout the rest of the team. And that's for starters with this team. Forget about in terms of the fact that, example, against Iowa, you had 3 of your own starters, whether it be in Bingham, Hall, and Lawyer, combined for only 3 points. That not only speaks to an offensive struggle or lack thereof, it speaks to essentially some of the decision-making, quite frankly, that as much as Tom Izzo has been well-respected and well-regarded, this has not been his best year in terms of making the right choices, whether it comes to certain play call design on key moments, or in this case, more notably, personnel decision. Trying to stick with playing with older players over and not, and letting the younger players wait on the bench. It's been an Izzo custom for years, but in this instance, in this season, has not worked out. I think in terms of putting the best 5 guys out on the floor at any given point in time, that's the way that gives you the best shot at winning some of these games. And it's just hasn't been worked out that way. And between all that and combined factors that obviously that Izzo and this team and the school and the rest of the conference and frankly the whole country's had to deal with, you can only use that as a crutch for so long, to the point where, okay, now you're just making that as an excuse. So you don't want that to come to that equation. But still, when you factor in not just that, but also how the rest of the teams in the conference have performed, dealing with the same issues that Michigan State had to deal with, you can't use COVID as an excuse. So it's definitely a eye-opening season, I believe, for his own company. I'm still not going to write them off completely, or write off the program completely after 1 year, because as we saw, other notable powerhouse teams and programs throughout the country have had off years. Duke, Carolina, Kansas, I could go on. But those are the notables. And of course, Michigan State.
North
Knowing and
Carolina by that.
yeah, North Carolina. So, yeah, Carolina, when I mentioned by North Carolina, that's what I meant. But with Izzo knowing that he has a recruitment class coming in and may very well get at least 1 year of play out of Imani Bates, you'd be more than willing to count this year as a wash, especially the way they're playing. They're not making a tournament, even if they somehow, let's say, when they beat Michigan at the end of the year. They would, I think it would still require them to make a deep run, if not flat out win the Big Ten tournament itself, to get one of those spots when it comes to Selection Sunday. So, again, it's quite evident from what we've seen this past two. At least they showed a better effort against Purdue. I will give them that. But it's just quite a symbolic snapshot of what this whole season has been. It's a complete and absolute wash.
Yeah. Darren, like Ed mentioned, you can't use COVID as an excuse. It's just not good enough.
No, I agree, because everyone's had to deal with the same issues. Now, look, I'm tired of Izzo, and he won one championship 20 years ago, 21 years ago, and Michigan State fans act like it was yesterday. I mean, this guy has underperformed with arguably some of the top, let's call it top 5 teams in the country at different years. He underperforms. I don't think he develops his 5 stars very well. You see these guys like Gary Harris and Miles Bridges who stay, for a second year, and there's no improvement from year 1 to year 2. He came into this year with an absolute horrifying point guard situation. There was no one to run the point. And, for 4 months, we heard about how Foster Loyer was ready to take the reins of this team. I mean, he should be playing down the street at OU or, UD Detroit Mercy. Hoggard doesn't look ready. Who's Watts? Rocket Watts has taken a step back. Another high recruit that you don't see has gotten any better. I mean, how do you come into this year without a point guard? Bigham hasn't improved. The only guys that really look good is, Aaron Henry and Marble at times. So there's really no excuse. This is just not a good team. Joey Hauser was supposed to be an 18-8 guy at night, and he went from starter to role player to he doesn't even play now. They play Kithier over him. So this team is it has a bunch of broken pieces, and they're not going to make the tournament. And I think, Izzo has to reassess, how he coaches games and how he develops talent going forward, because he's going to start losing out on a lot of big time recruits. In fact, he already has. Didn't a 5-star decommit a couple days ago?
Yep. There was a recent decommit. His name escapes me at the moment, but yes, you're absolutely right, Darren. This is an example.
You got Kithier in there on the roster. Got Josh Langford, Foster Loyer being so awful.
He's unplayable. Loyer is absolutely unplayable. Hoggard was supposed to come in and, as a freshman, and it sort of goes back to the Pistons idea. This is a lost season for Michigan State. If you're Izzo, how do you not throw a guy like Hoggard into the starting lineup and let him play 28 minutes a night and just gain experience for next year? I just, it's something I don't understand. Bigham again was supposed to be the guy this year. He stinks. They got nothing working for him this year. And, they got some nice recruits coming in next year. Max Christie, a 5-star guard. It's going to be, the team next year, if they want to succeed, is going to have the leadership, of the underclassmen. So it'll be very interesting to see how Izzo regroups after this year.
Yeah, and Darren, you pointed out to us off the air that the rest of the coaching staff has been terrible. It's not just Tom Izzo, and trust me, he has grown old already as a head coach. But the coaching staff hasn't helped out either, to say the least.
The coaching staff, it's been the same coaching staff for I think 12 or 13 years now. And
oh wow.
You know, these
Even
are
they become dinosaur fossils.
right. You know, at some point you got to get fresh minds in there. Not to say that these coaches aren't good coaches, but you know, the guards aren't being developed, the bigs aren't being developed. You know, I think Izzo plays a system and he gets players that are good for his system. And you know, all of a sudden these players aren't playing in the system anymore the way he wants them to play. You know, you got to recruit basketball players, not guys that you think can fit the system. And you know, I sort of think he's living a little bit in the past. You know, the Big Ten used to be, you know, give the ball down low to your big guy, let him go, you know, beat up the other guy and hold teams to 45 points. That's just not the reality of college basketball anymore. It's faster, you know, it's more points are being scored, more perimeter shooting, and I don't think Izzo's done a very good job of adjusting to that.
Agreed.
Right. Right. As a coaching staff, you have to develop your players further to make them elite on your own. And Michigan State lately has not done that.
But not to mention
they need
that,
to do that.
not to mention that, but also schematically as well. Have your players in the right spots on the floor at all times to make the right play. You know, we're going to talk about this in a little bit with Michigan, at how much of a clear, absolute contrast it has been to what Michigan State's been trying to do this year, or lack thereof.
Exactly. And that's another good point. Scheming. Yes. And Michigan is up next, and we're going to talk about them right now. They came back from down 12 in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, at Kohl Center to beat the Badgers 67-59 by 8 points. That was seen on CBS, I believe. Yes, that was an amazing win, Ed, before their 71-64 win aforementioned over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, like I mentioned on the Big Ten Network, or on FS1. So let's talk about the Wisconsin Badgers game first. Ed, just a thrilling comeback victory, period.
It absolutely was. And I thought that their performance against Minnesota at home was their best of the year in terms of pressure, narratives before and after coming into it, and overall performance of the team. This one blew it away in terms of the circumstances that you had to deal with. This is what their first game in 23 days, 3 weeks off. Granted, that most of that was out of their control due to the state, not the state necessarily, but the school following advice and guidelines from the state and the Department of Health and Human Services. So what that meant, the athletic program had to be on hold for a little bit. Again, now when you have other teams trying to accuse you of ducking, or you're doing this, you're being scared to play. Again, it was out their control, and I think you saw some of that layoff showing its head in this one, as well as we saw in Rutgers, but especially in this one, which led to them getting into that deficit beginning. But still, credit. This is where coaching matters. Coaching really matters here, people. Not just talent, but coaching. And the job that Juwan Howard and the other coaches as well, not just him, but the other guys deserve their shine as well. And getting the players set up in the right schemes. Schemes matter. Having the players available to execute matters. Like whenever you see Hunter Dickinson producing in the paint, being the effective not just rim protector, but using his size ability to get quality shots at the rim. Eventually, that attracts double teams, and what that leaves up open your perimeter shooters to take what the defense gives you. That's an example of knowing how to have the right players on the floor, and B, having them in the right spots. But I digress even further. What we saw against Wisconsin, it was an example of taking the hardest shots and then getting back up, dusting yourself off, and just coming back out to play. And great credit that has to be shown and given to Juwan Howard, not just for what he's shown in this game, drawing up plays at certain moments. There was like a hard technical foul. Not a hard technical, a hard foul that Coach Howard didn't agree with. He got teed up, and then what he did.
You mean a flagrant foul?
Yeah, it was a flagrant foul of sorts that Juwan Howard did not agree with. As a result, he got teed up for a technical. And then from that moment on, that's when the wheels turned and everything changed in terms of momentum, everything. The team got fired up. They played motivated as a result. And what you saw was the comeback in motion. Isaiah Livers has had a terrific season, shooting above or at near 50% overall from the field, well over 45% from 3-point range, and he's at 92%, or at least over 90% at the free throw line. He's having a damn near 50-40-90 season.
Red hot.
Yeah, and even on games when Franz Wagner isn't at his best, you still have the presence inside of Hunter Dickinson that can take the pressure off, be that big man force that Michigan has lacked in the past, and use that as an advantage against other teams. And again, like I mentioned, using that to kick out the other open shooters, like an Eli Brooks, for example, which has proven really beneficial, not just Michigan as an offensive unit, but as we've seen with these runs and stopping teams, their defense as well. And again, it comes back and circles back to that with your head coach knowing what the hell that he's doing. It has at the point where Michigan, even though they only have one loss in the season, they are considered by a lot of people, and now it's growing more and more. I had said, after the Minnesota game, that look out for this team to go on a run. Now, if Frank was here, I would, very much value his opinion on this. But I remember him telling me, listen, let's see how this team will look as we get close to February, close to March. Are they going to hit that wall, hit that bump? Even with this, 3-week break, so to speak, hiatus, they're still hitting their strides. And it lets me believe that, yes, this is a team that has potential to make a deep run, possibly a Final Four, especially if they are getting a number 1 seed outside of teams such as Baylor and Gonzaga. Those are two teams, they've been number 1 and 2 from the preseason. Michigan was picked by some to be 6th in the Big Ten in the preseason, and look where they are now. And to me, if that doesn't show you that Juwan Howard at least deserves consideration for Coach of the Year, if not the award outright itself, I don't know what else to tell you.
I tell you, they're just a powerhouse. Darren.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all the way here with Ed. The biggest thing for me is Michigan has totally exceeded expectations with everything this season. 3 weeks without playing. They weren't even allowed in the gym. When Michigan State, for instance, when they had the COVID situation, they were still allowed to practice. So, I love this Michigan team. Juwan Howard should get Coach of the Year. He's just done a phenomenal job. The transfers that he's had come in, the graduate.
I pointed out the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So my biggest thing with Michigan is they just have so many guys that can beat you. They go 7 or 8 deep, and if you need a bucket, there's 7 or 8 guys that can beat you, and not a lot of teams can say that, especially at the college level. So, anything can happen in the tournament. I hope they hit their stride like they were before this COVID situation. But going forward, Wagner and Livers and Dickinson, those guys are key. And if those guys are playing well, Michigan is very, very hard to beat.
Yep, that's the
Definitely.
three-headed monster. That is the three-headed monster I've alluded to throughout this season, and for good reason, as we've seen.
And then later on, they'll have to prove their dominance in that big dance, and hopefully they win that national title.
That would
For
be
goodness
great.
sake.
And, Ed, let me ask you a question. And
That's
Taylor,
the objective of this whole thing.
exactly.
Got to win the national title.
You got to. Is Gonzaga that much better? Is there a huge drop between Gonzaga and then Baylor and Michigan?
I'd say it's close. I'd say
I
it's
would
close
say-
between Gonzaga and Michigan.
Compared to what we saw at the earliest part of the season, if you asked me that question, I would have said, yeah, there's still a bit of a drop off. But now, as we've seen, the season progress more and more, and seeing how Michigan as a whole has performed, even in good starts and even in their bad starts, just again, momentum and how they look overall as a unit, communication, awareness, not to mention their adjustments on defensive end. If you want to say that they're not at the level of, say, of a Baylor, more power to you. but I believe, yes, they are more than earned that right to be compared at the very least to Gonzaga with the way they performed this year. And they may not get the number one overall seed and may very well go to Baylor or Gonzaga, but still, Michigan should be considered a force to be reckoned with for any team to deal with in this tournament.
Right.
Absolutely. And just adding off that, I don't want to put down Gonzaga, but I think night in, night out, I think Michigan's level of competition or skill of competition is probably a little bit higher than Gonzaga's.
Just a little bit.
Not to take anything away from Gonzaga, I just think the Big Ten is the strongest conference in the country. And it's a dogfight, 1 through
In men's basketball.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like what we see year in, year out in football with the SEC. You're seeing that type of medal of where if you can go through an absolute bloodbath, a dogfight of a conference schedule, and use that as learning experiences of what to do against the rest of the field, to me, you've already won one half of the battle. And that's what Michigan has done so far this year.
Very good point. Very good metaphor. Yes. So Michigan is at Ohio State taking on the Buckeyes at Value City Arena Sunday at 1 on CBS. And then they're off until Saturday, a week from Saturday, at the Indiana Hoosiers at Assembly Hall in Bloomington, Indiana. Time to be determined. So the Michigan Wolverines football team got a little bit of bad news. Quarterback Joe Milton has entered the transfer portal. So the quarterback situation, the Wolverines only have JJ McCarthy and Cade McNamara. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, still two quarterbacks are better than one, but at least your knee-jerk reaction was
concerning.
Like,
it's concerning.
Yeah, it's concerning.
Very
Yeah,
concerning
either way.
to see all these transfers. Period, but especially at the quarterback spot. Let's say, God forbid, something were to happen in the midst of a game where an injury or whatever the case may be, it has to force one or both of your quarterbacks, and you need a guy there for depth purposes. Especially once we saw not Dylan McCarthy, but Christian McCaffrey leave earlier.
Dylan McCaffrey.
Yeah, it was Dylan. I'm sorry. I'm thinking right. That speaks to how deep that family tree is. But with Dylan leaving, it hampered your already thinning depth at QB. Now with Milton, which was an experienced starter, granted he didn't live up to expectations, unfortunately, but still, it would have been a valued piece to have on your offense at the quarterback spot, at least when you have two younger guys, but at the very least, behind trying to get some reps and experience in. It would have helped to have that experienced person there for, at the very least, for comparison's sake. If you weren't going to give him the job, at least have him there as a reliable backup. But now it puts, to me, even more pressure on those two young guys. McNamara, I thought he did as good as he possibly can, but let's see what he would do, presumably, if he were to get the start from the get-go with this offense for a whole season, or at least the majority of the season. And then if that weren't to come to pass, then what? Now you're going to shift all your pressure and attention to a true freshman? It's very risky, very dicey. I understand Harbaugh has gotten all this hype and attention over the years of being a quarterback whisperer, but it's still, to this day, his best performance from a QB was either 1 year of Jake Rudock in his first go around, and then a season and a half of William Spade before he broke his collarbone against Iowa, and it's been downhill ever since. Shea Patterson, he showed glimpses, but it wasn't quite up to snuff. And now what we've seen here with the Joe Milton experience, quite a disappointing end, and it's quite figuratively a representation of what the Harbaugh era has been so far. You hope to see it improve, but it's just, again, concerning. I go back to that word, but it's concerning for a good reason.
Yeah, very concerning indeed. Darren.
Yeah, I mean, Harbaugh's got to get the QB thing figured out. I mean, he's been here and he hasn't had a quarterback. I mean, arguably the best quarterback was Jake Rudock, and I was high on Milton, and I think Ed and I both were. I mean, after that first Minnesota game, he just looked all business to me, and he looked like finally Harbaugh's got his guy. But that didn't turn out. But I got to tell you, McNamara definitely stepped up, and he looked okay, and he will be QB1 entering the season. I can guarantee you that. I mean, JJ McCarthy. I know he's a 5-star recruit, but very
At
rarely.
least a 4-star. I mean, I give him credit in to say that this is what the highest recruited QB prospect that that is coming to Michigan under Harbaugh, because like we mentioned before, Jake Rudock, grad transfer, Spate was already there. He wasn't even if he was like a recruit for Harbaugh, he was like what, a 2 or 3-star, and Shea Patterson, grad transfer from Mississippi. So again, we've seen all this hype before about touted QBs with 4 and 5 stars in the past. See Shane Morris, see Drew Henson, even to an extent Devin Gardner. He had showed promise, but then he got battered and then turned into a shell by the end. So we've yet to see that true QB play from Michigan in a long while. You can argue since either Chad Henne or Denard Robinson, and Denard wasn't even a pure quarterback. So
Been a long time.
yeah. So again, it is pressure for sure to place upon a young man. But when you're playing football, particularly college football, you need at least adequate, if not above average play from your quarterback to be a game manager at the very least. If he's not going to be the outright reason your team wins, he damn sure can't be the reason your team loses either.
Right.
Amen.
And that leads us to athletic director Ward Manuel signing a 5-year extension. Good for men's basketball, but either bad or so-so for football. Ed, we'll start with you again.
You can have Ward Manuel. I think there's some valid criticisms to Ward Manuel on the football front. Excuse me, but we got to remember how the praise and adulation he was getting for not only getting the Harbaugh deal done, but getting all the other coaches and his staff around situated. But we can't forget about the good job and the good kudos that Ward Manuel was getting at that point. Granted, it hasn't worked out in the football end, but most of that has been out of his control. That comes down to Harbaugh not having his team ready in big games and big moments. Contrast that, though, however, with what Juwan Howard has done in his short time there. That alone would have warranted me giving Ward Manuel an extension if I was the head of the school, or if I was school president, rather. And not to mention also in terms of representing the school and the athletic department specifically, if you want to call that CEO or GM role, whatever the case may be, he's nowhere near the type of person that comes off as smug or pompous or just absolute unpleasant to be around. That type of negative energy or aura that I saw with David Brandon. That's nowhere near, in my view, of what we see here with Ward Manuel. And that is another big plus and positive as to me, and more than warrants, again, him getting this extension. So between him, thank God, not being anywhere or anything like David Brandon, and the absolute home run of a hire that Juwan Howard has been, and the initial hype of bringing in Harbaugh, I thought Ward Manuel did a fantastic job and warrants or at least a good enough job to warrant this extension. So no problem for me on this one.
Right, except Harbaugh has never beaten Ohio State, except in 2016. Well, sort of. I understand the screw job, but Harbaugh should have been smarter all game long in that game in that year. But anyway, Harbaugh given an extension, Ward Manuel given an extension. Darren, what say you?
Listen, you can't. Ward Manuel has done a great job as the AD of Michigan, and you can't, put just football and basketball under the magnifying glass. I mean, the baseball team went to the College World Series The hockey team made it to the Frozen Four. I mean, if you look at these
Don't
pro,
forget the softball team.
And look, and if I may hop on, look at what the women's team has done this year. You know,
Wow.
you're getting Kim Barnes.
Sirs.
She's getting considerations for Coach of the Year honors in her own right.
exactly.
Wowzers.
You know, every sport is flourishing except for football. You know, football just has high hopes, but at the same time, you know, he made the right hire getting Harbaugh back, you know, when he did. So, you know, there's no one better for this job, I think, especially right now. And I think he's doing a great job, and all the other sports are reflecting on that. So, you know, he should be happy with the job he's done. And I think the extension was well deserved.
Yep. So yeah, that's actually a good thing. Nothing, pretty much almost nothing bad about that. So we transition to pro football, and we wrap up our episode with our What's Your Grade segment, brought to you by the Viget app. The Lions have hired Antoine Randall L as wide receivers coach. Antoine Randall L threw a touchdown pass for Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl in the 2005-2006 NFL season. Helped the Steelers win the Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks at Ford Field. Ed, what is your grade on Antoine Randall L as wide receivers coach?
I'm going to give this one a B. I put this one in the same line as the Deuce Staley hiring for the running backs and Mark Brunell for the quarterbacks. This is an experienced, well-regarded veteran player, not just in football, not just in the pros, but also in college as well. Remember his days back in Indiana when he was the versatile dual threat wideout slash quarterback. We saw that come to fruition with that famous trick play in the Super Bowl, the Heinz Ward. But it was more than that. And I think from what you saw, remember he did recently serve as the receivers coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And before, you mentioned, they brought in Brady and Gronk. Let's not forget also they developed guys such as Mike Evans, and was it Chris Godwin or Marquise Goodwin? Forgot his name, but his first name, but Goodwin, helped developing Mike Evans, Chase, the other tight end. Again, just that alone, that type of production and consistency that we saw from some of these wideouts before Tom Brady and Gronkowski and Antonio Brown came in. And again, once we saw their core shine even better, yes, talent does win. But again, it all comes down to coaching and what your coaches are teaching and instilling in your players at that specific spot. And for the receivers to do their job, between not just the influence of Brady, but also with what Antoine Randall had to be doing as well, that deserves credit. And I think it was one reason why the Lions wanted to give him this shot, especially if you want to potentially get another wideout in this upcoming draft to offset the potential loss of Kenny Golladay. So for me, I would give this a B.
All right. Ed gives it a B. Darren, what is your grade on Randall L?
Yeah, I give it a B plus. Right now with the Lions in a rebuild, I think you want guys on the staff that players want to play for. And, Deuce Staley, Antoine Randall, these are player coaches, guys that can relate to the coaches, that can sort of joke around with them, that have, not too far removed from the game as players. And I think that's the biggest thing. And get guys on your staff that players want to play for. And I think Deuce Staley and Antoine Randall are exactly that. So I love this hire. And look, it's not going to, make or break a team, who your wide receivers coach is, but if you have a good one, it's, it makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one a B plus as well. Good points by the both of you. The What's Your Grade segment is brought to you by the Viget Sports mobile app. Enter the referral code Stables, capital S at the beginning and lowercase letter B in the middle, for Stables Media when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the Viget app and sign up with the referral code Stables for Staples Media. Michigan users can pre-register with its partner BetMGM and make a minimum deposit of $10 in exchange for 2,000 Bitcoins. Take advantage of this opportunity, Michiganders. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast on Staples Media. We'll be back next week. For Ed Smith and Darren Weiss, on behalf of Frank Vashner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Darren Weiss on Twitter at DW33ZYY. And on Instagram at Darren Weiss, the number 8. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Power to the people. Hit them with a high. We rest our case. Stay safe.